In this video, we are going to be taking another look at ANKR and specifically to see what is going to be going on with the short-term views as well as that long-term picture. Guys, as we get into this, if you find it useful and informative, do hit that like button. I really appreciate it. Of course, if you're new, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell and tap on all and you'll be notified of all upcoming videos and updates for ANKR. Right, with that said, let's jump on down and get into what is going on here with ANKR. So the first thing that I kind of really want to talk about is obviously this 5 impulse waves to the upside. This kind of started or kick-started for ANKR back in March of 2020 when we had that crypto crash. Obviously, this triggered wave 1, which obviously peaked out towards the August time of 2020. The correction 2, it kind of bottomed out towards the end of 2020. So this was actually September for ANKR. Kind of traded sideways here for a little bit before going into wave 3. Now, wave 3 actually peaked out in March of 2021. It was a phenomenal high. We were setting some fantastic all-time highs on that journey. And then we had a bit of a correction here for wave 4. Now, obviously, wave 4 being kind of the opposite of what happens here for wave 2. So wave 2 was actually quite a sharp correction wave. Much sharper than some of these other cryptocurrencies. So therefore, wave 4 has actually been slightly dragged out a little bit longer. And I think this has actually helped a little bit with the ETH 2.0 nodes that have been able to be set up via ANKR. Now, obviously, this then means that we are expecting wave 5. Wave 5 does take this thing up to around that kind of 80-cent area, but I like to think of a theoretical dollar being a pretty sensible level as well. Now, the other thing that we can see on this weekly chart is obviously where our relative strength index is. So previously, before we had the push to the upside on wave 3, we can see that actually we were down here just about the midway point at about 52, I think it was. And then obviously when we've had correction wave 4 here, what we can see is actually we pulled this relative strength index down to 47. So now it's looking pretty primed and ready to go after wave 5. The other thing that we can see here are 2 lines. We have basically a bottom line here. This one actually is at 4.1 cent with a support line being up at 6.6. And in between is the buy zone. This is the buy zone where you want to potentially accumulate more ANKR so that you have a good position going into wave 5. And obviously, as you come in here, it's not going to last very long. You dive in and get right back out again very, very quickly. As I say, this is the accumulation zone. Right, with that being said, there's something else that's really clear and obvious that's really worth talking about before we jump down into any of the other timelines. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the fear and greed index. And I'll say why this is really important. Right now, or now as in today, it's indicating that we have fear in the market. The day before was extreme fear. Now, this is always a lagging indicator, right? It always shows you what the day previous was. It doesn't really give you much of an insight as to where things are likely to go. And this is really important to understand because yesterday was basically fear, not today, okay? And obviously the day previous, the Friday, would have been extreme fear. And that's really important to understand because when we actually start to go into the artificial intelligence on EVI, this actually then looks at the data and it gives you a more meaningful understanding as to where some things actually sit. So in the case of fear and greed, we actually have an A2 rating, which again is the second best rating that you can get. So how can you have something that says you should be incredibly fearful, extremely fearful, and then artificial intelligence saying, actually, for ANKR, it's the second best rating you can get. There's no fear here. This is greed scenario, right? So these are 2 polar opposites, right? And it's important that we understand and trust one of these over the other. For me, myself, I trust the artificial intelligence as it doesn't have any narrative to it. Ultimately, it is data-led and there's no human interaction. So for me, this is where I like to kind of lean on quite heavily to say, okay, is there fear or is there greed in the case of ANKR? So right now it's saying that there's an A2. And I think this is actually quite representative of what is happening today and going forward into tomorrow, what we might likely see here for ANKR, rather than relying on this one where it only shows us that there's fear in the space. And obviously that applies to all, right? It doesn't really break it down any further. So when we take a look at the chart here for ANKR and we can see, okay, great, we have a weekly chart and everything looks like it's gearing up nicely. And when we jump down into our daily and expand this up a bit, we can see that there is some significant increase from our buy zone area here and a right push to the upside. Obviously, when we went into this buy zone, we were oversold, and that was quite clear to see. So we didn't last here very long, and we were pushed right back up, and we found good support at 6.6 cent, and we started to push the price back up again. There's a small pullback here, but this is in line with Bitcoin, and we started to have another run to the upside now. When we have a look at the volume, of course, on this daily view, there isn't exactly a lot of volume to kind of go by. The volumes are incredibly small, and it means that there's potential for a huge upswing at the moment as well. Specifically on this daily chart, when we see there's very low volume, and we've got a relative strength index that's below that midway point at 45, loads of room to grow, and we have that artificial intelligence now showing us that there is no fear here and it's going into a greedy market. We obviously have high profitability at the best rating of A1. We have peak end value demand here at B2. The only issues with ANKR at the moment are the 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗔𝗡 ratio, the Sharpe ratio, and those moving averages. So we're about 50-50 in kind of, contrast to each other from this artificial intelligence. And ultimately, this kind of brings EY's overall rating of ANKR up to B3, which makes it a pretty interesting project to potentially be getting into. So when we take a look at it from here, we can say, okay, we were in the buy zone. This was an accumulation point. We obviously bounced right out of here, found good support, and we've continued this motion to the upside on this daily chart. That looks like it's going to continue here. Now, when we drop this down into our hourly view, we actually get a bit of a better picture, right? So obviously here we can see we go into the buy area. We shoot right on out of here very quickly. We go up into an overbought situation because everyone's buying it up. They pull it down towards our 6.6 support line, briefly dip it below that, and otherwise it finds good support on 6.6 cent and starts to push on up again. There was another support line form of resistance at 7.3. We broke up above it. We kind of tried to hover it and keep it. It was a bit of a battle, and right now we're actually above this zone. And this is actually quite a key and important thing, because what we see here is actually a motion to the upside that's sustainable and looks like it's going to continue. On this hourly chart, we do expect that we will have pullbacks here and there, but things are definitely lining up quite nicely. And when we zoom on out, we can still see that there's no volume really behind this. And with that sentiment eventually shifting, at least according to the artificial intelligence, that we could potentially start seeing this decent volume come in for ANKR and actually help push the price of ANKR up a little bit further. So right now that volume is low and we're looking to grow it. And with that growing volume, we could potentially push that price a little bit higher. But obviously on the short term, it's important to understand that we are quite high on our RSI. The meaning of this would be that we'd potentially push it a little bit higher and then pull the relative strength index down. And if we can do this whilst maintaining a pretty good volume ratio, we could push the price up, come down and find good support, and then continue the growth. So right now what we're looking for is basically a way to kind of utilize this relative strength index to the potential that it has, and obviously grow this volume in a good way. What we're looking for is obviously to see this artificial intelligence driven fear and greed index mirrored across into our generalized fear and greed index. If that happens, I think that'll be a pretty good sign that the sentiment in the market has changed. Right now, for those who are in the know, they can take advantage of the fact that the artificial intelligence is picking up on some data signals that are saying that there's actually more greed for ANKR right now than there is fear. And to see something like that in stark contrast to that of the generalized fear and greed index, it puts us in a pretty confident position here for ANKR. Now we're going to jump back up into our daily view and talk about not only just this buy zone, but also the targets that we're looking for. So obviously there's going to be a bit of an uphill battle, as most of these cryptocurrencies have corrected quite significantly during this fourth wave, that we are going to be trying to go up towards that 236 area. This comes in at about 8.7 cent. It's going to be a major resistance barrier for us, but if we can flip it and turn it into support, the next kind of major target would then be up at 11.2 cent. That would be the 382 area of the Fibonacci. From here, obviously pushing on through those battles and turning that into a support, comes 13.2 cent. And this will be the last kind of major one before we enter this box just here. This box actually represents three key areas of that Fibonacci retracement: the 618, the 702, and the 786. That basically means that we will be entering this box at about 15.2 cent and looking to get a closed candle above 18.1. A closed candle, preferably a weekly closed candle, above 18.1 would be a very strong signal to signify us going into wave 5 and going after the very first price target of 32.3 cents. After that, we are talking about the 2.618, the 3.618, and again, these come in at 49 cents and 66 cents respectively. After that, we are talking about 77 cents, and that's where the kind of top level Fibonacci extension level comes in. Now, obviously, I have got that fifth wave a little bit higher at that theoretical dollar level. I think that's going to be the psychological barrier for ANKR, and I think it's going to struggle this cycle to go higher than that. That being said, long term, with everything that ANKR are doing and how heavily they are integrated across so many different chains, it's hard to think that ultimately ANKR will not succeed longer term. there's so much potential to this project. It's hard to think that anything is really going to kind of cause a bit of a barrier for this project to succeed longer term. And obviously with Ethereum 2.0 being one of the things that ANKR is really focusing on, obviously that's going to be launching in 2022. That's going to be a key player in the growth of ANKR as well. So guys, that is kind of a very brief update that I have on ANKR in this particular video. Hopefully you have found it useful. If you have, definitely do go ahead and give me a like. I really appreciate that. And if you are new to the space, then do go ahead and subscribe. I really do appreciate that. And by hitting the bell and tapping on all, you'll be kept up to date with everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. It is free. You'll stay well informed. So why not? With that said, done and out of the way, guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.